Prince George turns 12 this month, and royal rules are about to become stricter than ever. From travel restrictions to a new school, limited technology, and unusual family traditions, his life is changing fast. Stay with me to see the rules and restrictions shaping the future king's childhood. Let's start with the rule that's been dominating headlines all year, because it's the one that changes everything. Once George turned 12, a decades-old convention kicked in. Heirs to the throne aren't supposed to travel on the same aircraft. Prince George faced a significant change in royal protocol when he celebrated his 12th birthday on July 22, 2025. And as second in line to the throne, he would no longer be permitted to fly on the same aircraft as his father, Prince William, a strict rule designed to protect the line of succession to the British throne. Once George turned 12, he was required to travel separately from his father during all air travel. It's not just William he's separated from. Prince George's official preparations kicked off in July 2025 when he celebrated his 12th birthday, and as second in line to the throne, he was forced to travel separately from his family on royal visits and tours, not just without his siblings, but without his father too, since William is first in line. There's even uncertainty about whether his own mother and younger siblings can still fly with him, since it remains unclear whether George will fly solo or be allowed to continue traveling with his mother, the Princess of Wales, and his younger siblings. And the protocol may also affect Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, who might no longer be able to fly with their older brother due to their positions in the line of succession. Why does this rule even exist? Because the royal family has buried people this way before. The precaution stems from historical tragedies involving royal family members in air accidents. In 1937, Prince Philip's sister Princess Cecile died in a plane crash. The late Queen's uncle Prince George, Duke of Kent, lost his life in an air accident in 1942. And the Queen's cousin Prince William of Gloucester died while participating in an air show in 1972. Those three deaths are why, even now, a 12-year-old boy can't sit next to his own dad on a flight to a wedding. The family's own former pilot has talked about exactly how this worked when William was the one turning 12. King Charles' former pilot, Graham Laurie, explained that they flew all four, the Prince, the Princess, Prince William and Prince Harry, up until Prince William was 12 years old, after which he had to have a separate aircraft, and they could only fly all four together when they were young with written permission of the Queen. When William became 12, he would fly normally in a jet from Northolt, while the pilot flew the other three separately. That's not folklore, that's a pilot who physically flew the family, describing the exact protocol George is now inheriting. It's worth being honest about how loose this rule actually got while George was small. The late Queen Elizabeth II routinely waived this rule for William and Kate when their children were small, allowing the family to travel together on international tours. Photos exist of George, Charlotte, Louis, William, and Kate all boarding the same aircraft for tours of Canada, Australia, Poland. That flexibility was always going to run out at a specific age, and that age has now arrived. As one report on the family put it plainly, it's likely that as George gets older, he may begin traveling separately from his parents. There's a second layer to this rule that people often miss. It's not really about William and George never sharing airspace. It's about never having two heirs in the same succession chain on one plane, full stop. George is second in line. William is first. If something happened to that one aircraft, the monarchy would lose two links in the chain in one moment. Splitting them is the fix. And this isn't just theoretical box ticking for the royal household. The family has had to explain it publicly, more than once, because journalists keep spotting them boarding planes together and asking why the rule doesn't seem to apply. The honest answer, according to royal watchers, is that while there is no official rule on this, and royal heirs have traveled together in the past, it is something that the Queen has the final say on. Now that Charles sits on the throne, that final call belongs to him. So George's 12th birthday didn't just mean a bigger cake. It meant the start of a different kind of childhood. One where the mechanics of the monarchy itself start dictating how he moves around the world. And flying separately from his own father is just the opening move. Because that same birthday also triggers something else. It's the exact age his father changed his surname at school, the exact age Eton locks its doors for an incoming boarder, and the exact age the palace starts treating him less like a child and more like a future head of state. The flight separation isn't an isolated rule. It's part of a whole cluster of changes that hit at exactly the same birthday, almost like the palace has a checklist that gets triggered the moment George turns 12. And the most visible of those changes is happening in his classroom right now. For years, George has gone to school under a name that sounds almost ordinary. They have different names they're given at school, and are formally known in class as George Wales, Charlotte Wales, and Louis Wales, as a nod to their parents' titles. Not Prince George Windsor, not His Royal Highness. Just George Wales sitting in a classroom, answering to a name most of his classmates could say without flinching. That surname itself changed recently too. They used to be known as George Cambridge, Charlotte Cambridge, and Louis Cambridge, but since King Charles took over the throne, they've made a switch to Wales. It's a small thing, but it tells you something about how deliberately the family manages his identity. Even his name at school isn't fixed. It shifts with the crown. That naming convention isn't new to this generation either. Even Prince William and Prince Harry had their father's title Wales at school. George is walking a path his dad and uncle already walked. Generation after generation of princes answering to a slightly disguised version of themselves in the classroom. But the classroom itself is about to change entirely. And this is where the age 12 rule bites hardest. George is leaving Lambrook, the school he's attended for years, and heading somewhere far stricter. The 12-year-old son of the Prince and Princess of Wales is set to enroll in Eton College once he graduates from Lambrook School in July. This isn't a school he's choosing for himself. It's the school his father went to. The school with a private boarding school for boys aged 13 to 18 that charges families roughly the same as a small mortgage every year. The institution charges approximately £63,000 per year and is where George's father, Prince William, and uncle Prince Harry attended. The security planning for that move started long before George ever set foot on the grounds. Reports from earlier this year described the school quietly preparing behind the scenes. Certain rooms at Eton were being revamped with beefed-up security in preparation for George's arrival later this year. That's not a normal transfer. Normal students don't get rooms retrofitted months in advance because of who might be watching them from outside the fence. And once he's actually there, the rules of ordinary boarding life apply to him just as strictly as anyone else. Arguably more so, because there's no room for exceptions when hundreds of other boys are watching how he's treated. As a prince, George must follow royal rules and protocols. And if all the royal rules that control tea time or restroom usage seem odd, Eton has plenty of strange rules of its own. There's a colors test he has to pass just to prove he knows the school's own geography. One of George's first trials will be his colors test, for which he must memorize the location of school buildings and the official colors of each of its 25 boarding houses. Fail to turn in decent work, and a teacher can, quite literally, tear it in half in front of him. If he hands in a bad piece of schoolwork, he will receive a rip, named after the tradition of a master tearing the top of a page, and if he has too many rips, he will get a white ticket, which triggers a formal progress review. There's no royal exemption clause for that. A future king can get his homework physically ripped up just like anyone else in his house. Arrive late, and there's a punishment book waiting with his name in it. George will also need to arrive on time to avoid the tardy book, a punishment requiring pupils to get up early to sign their name in a book kept in the administrative hub known as the school office. Underperform repeatedly, and there are older, stranger punishments still on the books. Eton punishments include lines, copying out 100 hexameters of Latin poetry, a Georgic, copying 500 hexameters, and chores, a form of unpaid labor such as weeding a housemaster's garden, a future monarch, pulling weeds because he missed a deadline. Even where he sleeps is dictated entirely by security needs, not comfort or choice. The prince will sleep in the manor house dorms. specifically because this will be the easiest place to house his overnight protection officers, and Harry was also placed in Manor House during his own Eton days for security purposes. His own uncle went through this exact arrangement and didn't love it. Harry wrote candidly about how strange it was trying to make friends with a team of security guards following him around, needing friends who'd treat him normal, which meant ignoring the armed bodyguards sleeping down the hall. That's the environment George is stepping into. Not a normal dorm room. A dorm room built around a protection detail. So between the surname swap, the boarding school move, the physical security retrofit, and the punishment system waiting for him on day one, George's 12th birthday isn't a milestone. It's a hinge. Everything about how he's raised pivots on it. And that pivot doesn't stop at school gates. It follows him home too, into rules about phones, food, games, and even what he's allowed to say at the dinner table. Outside the school gates, George's daily life is boxed in by restrictions that have nothing to do with succession or security. They're just rules his parents have imposed, and they're stricter than almost anything you'd find in an average British household. Start with the phone. George doesn't have one, not a proper one anyway, and his father has said so directly. Speaking about the family's approach to devices, William said plainly, "We sit and chat. It's really important. None of our children have any phones, which we're very strict about. Not a soft preference, a rule he described as something they're very strict about." He did leave a small door open for the future, saying he thinks when George moves on to secondary school, then maybe he might have a phone that has no internet access. Even that concession comes with a catch: no internet, meaning George would carry a phone that can't actually do most of what a phone is for. That restriction sits inside a much wider ban on screens generally. Prince William and Princess Kate reportedly don't allow their kids to play with any electronic toys, preferring their children to participate in activities and avoid tablets like iPads. That means no screen time, no Roblox, no Minecraft, no Toca Boca. For a kid his age, that's a genuinely unusual restriction. Most of George's peers are growing up with tablets from toddlerhood. He wasn't allowed one. Video games occupy a strange middle ground here, because George clearly likes them, and his father has admitted it's become a real balancing act at home. William told an interviewer, "At the moment, it's trying to regulate the gaming, monitoring screen time. Got to be careful of that. They're fascinated by it." George particularly. He's more interested in it, so it's not a total ban forever. It's closer to constant supervision, William personally managing how much time his son spends on a controller. That's a level of parental oversight most 12-year-olds don't get, precisely because the family is aware of how easily unsupervised screen time turns into unsupervised internet access, which for a future king carries risks an ordinary parent never has to think about. Then there's food. The palace treats what George eats as seriously as what he studies. George, Charlotte, and Louis are not allowed to eat with their parents during official and festive dinners, a rule that allows for no exceptions, not even at Christmas. On these occasions, they eat alone, with the nanny, in a separate room. Former royal chef Darren McGrady revealed this, explaining that children cannot sit with adults until they have learned the art of polite conversation. Christmas dinner, the one meal a year most families build memories around. George doesn't get to sit at that table with his parents until he's proven he can behave at it. The former chef put it even more bluntly about the reasoning behind that separation. The children always ate in the nursery until they were old enough to conduct themselves properly at the dining table. So, for the Queen, there was never a case of putting a high chair at the table, with a little baby squealing and throwing food. That standard hasn't relaxed much. Even now, official events keep the children at arm's length from the adult table. And it's not just where he eats, it's what's on the plate. The dietary slips allowed to children do not include snacks or, in general, overly processed foods, packaged snacks, and everyday junk food. Snacks are prepared by working royal chefs and consist mainly of healthy snacks, smoothies, and homemade desserts. No crisps grabbed from a cupboard. No, fast food picked up on the way home. Everything is prepared, monitored, and mostly healthy. whether he likes it or not. Though reports say George has his preferences honored where possible, since George is particularly fond of pasta and pizza. Charlotte has a weakness for curry, olives, and spicy dishes, while Louis is particularly fond of vegetables. Even table manners themselves are treated as a formal subject, not something picked up naturally. The young princes and the princess have been taking etiquette lessons since a very young age. With particular attention to the basic table manners the royal family must follow. Lessons that cover everything from how to use napkins and cutlery to the appropriate level of voice for conversations during meals. George isn't just told to sit up straight, he's formally instructed in it, the way other kids get instructed in spelling or times tables. Language is next on the list, and this one isn't optional either. There is one strict rule the family's nanny has enforced from day one. The nanny has made learning a second language an absolute priority, ensuring that George, Charlotte, and Louis practice speaking Spanish daily, every single day. Not an occasional lesson, a daily habit built into the rhythm of his upbringing, and it started working early, since by the time Charlotte went off to nursery in 2018, she was able to count in Spanish, as was George. Even the vocabulary used around George at home is restricted, in ways you wouldn't expect. His own nanny isn't allowed to call him a kid. Norland nannies cannot use a word that most parents probably say dozens of times a day, and although she can't call George, Charlotte, and Louis kids, life with the Wales family is otherwise fairly normal. It's a strange, small detail, but it tells you the level of control baked into everything around him, down to the words adults are permitted to use in his presence. Discipline itself is handled with total consistency, and the person enforcing it, the nanny Maria Barallo, has been doing it since George was a baby. A fellow Norland-trained expert described her method bluntly. There will be no messing, because she'll be aware that as they step off planes, holding Mum's hands, smiling and waving to the crowds, there can't be any crying or terrible twos or tantrums. That's the standard George has been held to since before he could talk. Composure in public, no matter what. Board games get a mention too, oddly enough, and this is one rule that applies to the whole family, adults included. Prince Andrew revealed that Monopoly is banned in royal homes, saying, "We're not allowed to play Monopoly at home." It gets too vicious. George grows up in a household where even a board game night comes with restrictions. So between the phones, the tablets, the console time, the food, the language drills, and the banned vocabulary, George's home life is arguably more regimented than his school life. And all of that domestic structure is really just preparation for the next layer of rules. The ones that govern how he's expected to speak, dress, and behave in public, where the whole world is watching and there's no room for a bad day. Once George steps outside his front door and into public view, an entirely different rulebook takes over. One built around language, clothing, and access, all designed to protect the image and the security of the monarchy at the same time. Start with how he's supposed to talk. Certain everyday words are treated as genuinely off-limits in royal circles, and George is expected to know the difference by now. Royals must remain proper in conversations, meaning avoiding words like toilet and pardon. Replace toilet with lavatory and pardon with an apologetic sorry. One royal etiquette author didn't hold back, describing how seriously this is taken. Saying the word toilet is as jarring to an upper-class English ear as the F word. In fact, I get the impression that they would actually prefer the F word. Never say toilet, ever. This rule is not optional. It is imperative. That's the standard of language control a 12-year-old prince grows up inside. The rules don't stop at swear words. They extend to words most people consider perfectly polite. More vocabulary swaps follow the same pattern. Royals are expected to say sofa rather than couch, and they are placed in a sitting room or drawing room and never a living room, den, or lounge. And a person's perfume should be referred to as their scent. George has been absorbing this vocabulary his entire life, likely without even realizing half of it is a rule, rather than just how his family happens to talk. Clothing carries its own weight. For years, George has been dressed in shorts for public appearances, and that's not a style choice. It's a rule with an expiry date. Boys are expected to wear shorts, but this only applies up until a certain age, in this case, 10, when long trousers are then the accepted choice of clothing. George has already aged out of that particular uniform, but it shows how even something as simple as trouser length is dictated by tradition rather than personal preference. Bowing and curtsying come next, and while young children get some leeway, the expectation tightens as they age. While members of the royal family are expected to bow or curtsy to the king and queen, young royal children are generally given latitude because of their age, and are not expected to observe protocol as strictly as adults. That latitude shrinks every year George gets older. The closer he gets to being seen as a young adult rather than a child, the more strictly that rule will apply to him specifically. Then there's access, who George is and isn't allowed to meet, and how those meetings are supposed to be handled. There's a long-standing informal rule that royal children don't meet foreign heads of state, and it's been broken exactly once for George, memorably. Royal kids can't meet leaders of foreign countries. However, William and Kate broke that rule with Prince George in 2016, when he met former US President Barack Obama, though it hasn't been done since one meeting nearly a decade ago, and the rule snapped back into place immediately afterward. Selfies and autographs fall under the same kind of restriction. Selfies with royals would have been an etiquette faux pas until not long ago, though things have started to relax in recent years, and senior royals will occasionally pose for pictures with fans. Even so, the default position remains firmly against it. Royal commentator Fitzwilliams put it simply, when a member of the public asks for a photo, it's something that is not done generally unless there's a specific reason for the picture, and autographs are generally a hard no, for the simple reason that they could easily lead to fakes. George grows up understanding that even a friendly gesture toward a stranger has to be filtered through a security and image lens first. Public composure is its own category of rule, and it applies even during moments most people would consider fair game for genuine emotion. Royal expert Windsor described the family's traditional stance on showing feelings in public, noting that things have loosened slightly in recent years, but the underlying culture still leans toward restraint. The British way is to keep our emotions to ourselves, she says. George is growing up in the exact era where that rule is being tested and slowly bent, but it's still the baseline he's measured against. Even something as mundane as a handshake gets codified into a precise physical technique. The handshake should be firm. The thumb goes up, the fingers go together. Shake for 2 pumps, explains Windsor. 2 pumps, not 1, not 3. That level of precision, applied to something as small as a greeting, tells you how tightly George's public behavior is scripted, even in interactions that look completely spontaneous. Behind almost every one of these public-facing rules sits the same justification: security. It isn't abstract for George. There have been real, documented threats made against him specifically. A self-professed ISIS supporter who pleaded guilty had shared hundreds of propaganda messages, one of them reportedly of Prince George's school, the address, and the message, "Even the royal family will not be left alone." School starts early. That threat was treated with total seriousness by the courts. The judge overseeing the case told the man he was facing the most disturbing allegations. It is inevitable that you will receive a very lengthy prison sentence, and there will be a consideration of a life prison sentence. That's the backdrop every one of George's public rules exists against. Every handshake, every no photo, every scripted greeting is downstream of genuine documented danger, which is exactly why the security apparatus around him is as extensive as it is. And that's the last piece of this puzzle, the part of George's life that almost never gets shown on camera at all. Everything George does, everywhere he goes, sits inside a security operation that most people never notice, because it's designed specifically not to be noticed. That invisibility is itself one of the strictest rules of all. Getting him to school every day involves more planning than most people realize. Prince William and Middleton are intent on accompanying their kids to school as much as possible, which means the whole family travels via a motorcade with security. and the security team has likely figured out a handful of routes that they can change up every day, so that they get Prince George to school on time and also confuse anyone who might be trying to track their movement. Varying the route isn't paranoia. It's standard protective practice for a child whose daily location is, by definition, predictable and public. A former protection officer explained just how tightly the school environment itself gets locked down around arrival and departure times. All schools consist of a lockdown procedure outside arrival and departure hours, so it's quite an easy environment for the police team to control themselves, Morgan explained. That's the reality behind George walking through a school gate that looks, on the surface, like any other school gate. The scale of protection on offer isn't small either. 2010 report on Royal Security estimated staggering numbers. Each royal has 5 armed guards on each of them at all times, and the royal family's security bill is paid for by the Metropolitan Police and allegedly costs more than £120 million per year. George isn't guarded by one person quietly standing in a corner. He's guarded by a coordinated team funded at a national level, treated as a matter of state security rather than personal preference. That level of protection isn't paranoia dreamed up by overprotective parents. It followed real incidents. George was a stalking victim, and after that initial incident, Prince William and Kate Middleton reportedly asked for extra security to follow him to school and stick around during the day. A stalking case against a child is what escalated the security around George's school life to the level it's at today. That same security logic follows him into Eton, shaping decisions that look, from the outside, like ordinary boarding school choices, but are actually driven entirely by protection needs. His dorm placement wasn't about tradition or convenience. The prince will sleep in the Manor House dorms specifically because this will be the easiest place to house his overnight protection officers. Even his housemaster's choice of building was, in part, a security decision before it was an educational one. And this is where all 5 threads of George's life actually converge. The flight separation exists because the family has literally buried heirs killed in plane crashes. The school move to Eton comes wrapped in beefed-up security precisely because of who he is. The phone ban and the screen restrictions aren't just old-fashioned parenting, they're partly about limiting his digital footprint. In a world where a threat against him has already led to a life sentence recommendation in court. The vocabulary rules, the handshake technique, the no selfies default, all of it exists to keep George's public behavior predictable, controlled, and safe. Because unpredictability is exactly what security teams can't plan around. Even the smaller domestic rules, the daily Spanish lessons, the banned Monopoly nights, eating separately from his parents at Christmas, fit into the same overall picture once you step back. They're not random quirks collected for a listicle. They're a 12-year-old being shaped piece by piece, meal by meal, flight by flight, into someone who can one day carry the weight of the crown without flinching in front of a camera, without saying the wrong word to a foreign dignitary, without endangering the line of succession by sitting on the wrong plane. None of this means George's childhood is miserable. Reports consistently describe a boy who still rides bikes, still plays with Legos, still gets excited about a new video game his dad has to gently rein in. Prince George absolutely adores Legos. Before discovering the joy of Legos, he had wooden blocks, and was also given a rocking horse, a bicycle he loves riding, and a wooden train. He's a kid underneath all of it. But he's a kid whose bike rides happen inside a security perimeter, whose Lego time is monitored for screen time balance, whose Christmas dinner happens in a different room from his parents, and whose 12th birthday just quietly rewired his entire daily existence, from the plane he can't board, to the school he's about to enter, to the words he's not allowed to say out loud. That's the machinery behind the boy. Not a single dramatic rule, but dozens of small, deliberate ones stacked on top of each other since the day he was born, all pointing toward the same outcome, a future king who's had almost no room ever to simply be unguarded. Future king who's had almost no room ever to simply